you have a social responsibility to ensure that you are minimizing environmental impact by properly managing devices that, have toxic components, batteries, et cetera, right? And so we make an effort here to try to do that.
You're listening to the Global Workforce Podcast with me, George Britton. Each week, we interview an industry expert to dive deeper into the world of managing a global workforce and discuss the big strategic challenges that you're going to encounter along the way. This episode is brought to you by Omnipresent, the global employment platform that allows you to employ anyone, anywhere without having to set up an entity. Designed, built, and supported by global employment experts, Omnipresent takes care of your international employees and contractors, so you don't have to worry about payroll, HR, or compliance issues, making it easier, faster, and safer to expand internationally. My guest today is Carlos Escutia, CEO of GroWrk. Founded in 2019, they were the first all-in-one remote workplace management platform for distributed teams. Carlos, great to have you on the podcast today. Could you tell me a bit about yourself and about GroWrk?
Hey, George, thank you for having us here. Pleasure. Yeah. Look, the origin of GroWrk really was from a previous experience. It's one of those things that started as a scratching my own itch type of thing, right? Before this is my second venture-backed company. Before this, I was a co-founder of a company in San Francisco that focused on furniture leases, right, for short-term hospitality businesses. And so as we started scaling that company pretty fast, we started hiring engineers in India and Latin America, simply because it was, more cost effective to do so than to hire in the Bay Area. And I ran across the issues that we set out to solve with GroWrk, right? And, thinking, hey, there's going to be a better way to do this. This was all before the pandemic. Basically, you know, eh, I just noticed that there was a need there. There were other companies like ours that were looking to recruit outside of the Bay Area because it was better, from a cost standpoint. And the logistical challenges of supporting and enabling those team members outside of an office was just there. Then the pandemic arrived and it accelerated all these trends that we have been seeing around distributed work from years to months, right? After all that, there's been a clear inflection point where, the adoption of distributed work, it's here to stay, despite the push to, return to the office, there's a consistent trend to hire from anywhere. And the reason being is that companies like ours, Omnipresent, GroWrk, we're part of this growing ecosystem that enables any organization to, scale globally at a touch of a button, right? Which, make organizations more resilient, cost effective, and efficient when it comes down to, going to market. And so that's the origin of GroWrk. We continue to scale. As you know, uh, this is a big pain point that we're setting out to solve, and we continue to do so.
100%. Yeah, it's absolutely a big pain point you're solving, but also something I think we feel at Omnipresent, but also something that a lot of our clients feel as well. I think what's something that's quite interesting is what you mentioned there. It's actually, you recognize this problem pre-pandemic, like you say, like furniture leasing company. Sounds like you must have been quite a tech-focused furniture leasing company. There aren't many furniture leasing companies that I think about that have engineering teams internationally, but it sounds like you already saw the problem before the pandemic hit, correct?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, we're a tech business. We actually we're backed by tier one, venture funds, raised a lot of capital pretty early, expanded pretty fast, and yeah, it's uh, you know, I think that what happened back then, we're talking about, between 2017, 2000, 20. That's the time period we're looking at. Is that, there were a lot of companies in the Bay Area that were raising a lot of capital up front and, we're just burning through it, right? Left and right. And so in an effort to, extend our runways and make ourselves more efficient, we're like, hey, it doesn't make sense to be bidding against, an engineer that Google or Facebook are, trying to get from you for, $300,000, $400,000. Let's just hire, similar, caliber team members in India or Latin America, and let's see what happens. Right. And that same realization was the same one, other organizations had. And that was basically what drove, the need for a solution that supported those team members. Right.
Mm. Yeah, it sounds somewhat similar to the omnipresent origin. So I don't think I've actually mentioned this on the podcast. Maybe I'll mention it a bit now. But what happened was so our co-founders got together at Entrepreneur First in London back at the end of 2019. So right at the very before the pre-pandemic stuff. And they basically realized that remote work was getting more productive than in-person work. And although it probably wasn't the case for all types of roles at that point, they could see that in the future, there's going to be this inflection point. I think we're just very fortunate. We were one of the companies that was really able to ride the wave of the pandemic and that kind of step change in remote work. It sounds like you're probably in a similar boat to us there.
100%, exactly the same story.
Yeah. So tell me, Carlos, how like remote work has fundamentally changed the way that organizations operate. From your perspective, how does that impact IT asset management, and how has that evolved as remote work has become more prevalent?
Yeah, no, it's a big challenge, right? And look, the structure that most organizations are following now, it's a sort of a hybrid one, right? Where you have some team members in office and you hire team members outside of that office in the same country or globally. And so what that results on is basically how do you how do you develop the IT infrastructure needed to ensure that you perform operations, you know, in the same way that you would do in office, while also maintaining the high security standards that you need, right? Because the main issue with globally distributed team when it comes down to IT is security. How do you ensure that you have control over the assets that your team members are using anywhere in the world, right? That they have access to the right networks, that, they're following the proper, security, guidelines, et cetera. Right. And so that's a big challenge. It's difficult as it is to have to manage this in an office or in a remote team in a country, let alone globally. Right. And so that is the big need and that we set out to solve. How do we give companies the peace of mind of, hey, no matter where I hire in the world, know that your team members will receive their devices on time and fully, uploaded or enrolled, fully imaged or enrolled in the device management solution that you need to use to ensure that those devices are properly secured at all times, right? The logistics of delivering those devices on time, it's important because, we work with a lot of companies that hire engineers, right? These are high paying jobs that, if an engineer does not get their equipment on time, any day that passes after that onboarding period, obviously it looks good on you as a company. It looks bad on you as a company, but it also costs a lot, right? Because you're already paying these employees, and they're not able to do anything for you, right? And so that's a big challenge. Also, how do you provide support 24/7 to ensure that you minimize any type of downtime for those assets, right? If they're experiencing malfunctions, how do you make sure that you can either repair or replace right away so that you minimize that downtime? And then the last part of it is the critical part too, which is how do you recover devices when team members leave your organization for both things. The first one is obviously maximizing the lifespan of those devices that could be repurposed or used again with additional with team members on the road if they're still within the life cycle within the lifetime of those assets, right? So that you optimize your capex in IT instead of acquiring new assets, which is these line items are millions of dollars in the balance sheet of an organization. So we help companies save that much by optimizing and extending those repurposing those devices for future employees, right? But the second one is the security one. How do you make sure that those devices are retrieved on time so that you mitigate any potential risks for the data that lives in those devices? We can manage obviously the entire process anywhere in the world, but also adjust to following, for example, legal full procedures, which happen quite often, right? Hey, that former employee is going to be going through a legal process. That device needs to be set aside and, not be touched until, it's requested by forensics or whatever it is that we can send it to the appropriate, counterpart to follow that process. So all of those pieces are very important and very critical to maintain And again, at a global scale, when you have hundreds of employees or thousands of employees, it becomes almost an impossible task if you're doing it manually. So that is where GroWrk comes in, right? We help organizations automate and streamline all of these processes by managing and having visibility of each of these needs, at the touch of a button.
Makes total sense. And I definitely have felt that pain before when you've got a critical hire, you want to get them started as soon as possible. And like every day that goes by, in fact, feels like a lost like year almost of like getting impact out of them. And if it's something as what seems as simple and as trivial as getting them a laptop, like can be painful when you know that you want to get them started. But I'm curious though, Carlos, what do you typically see? So for companies that are say early stage, that have got remote teams and they're not using a solution like GroWrk, what do you typically find they're doing? Are they just getting the employee, like the remote employees, to get their own hardware, or they just kind of like patch some kind of solution together where they're sending stuff out, or like how do they typically operate without GroWrk?
Yeah. When you're just getting started, you're a small startup, you'll figure it out. It's not the right solution. We're not the right solution for, an early stage company that are just getting started. We ourselves went through that process, right? We didn't procure equipment to our own employees in the beginning. Hey, bring your own device and then we'll figure it out if you need something and, we'll give you
Mm,
something, right? Just to get started and get going. There comes a point though, when if you're starting to, go after certifications, security certifications, which are important to work with the enterprise, for example, such as, SOC 2, which these are requirements. You do need to provide your own equipment, have control to have control over those devices. Because if you have an employee bring their own devices, you know, you don't fully have control over whatever data lives in those devices, right? And so that is really the one main difference as to why organizations choose to procure devices themselves instead of having their employees bringing their own devices, right? The second part is the leasing versus owning, which was a big thing. Even when we started, and given my background, coming from a company that used to do furniture leases, right? We debated this a lot. Like, hey, should we provide IT, leasing solutions to companies? And there's demand for it, right? There will always be demand for this because obviously there are companies that are looking to optimize their capital expenses and turn it more into an operating expense, which was the same, reason why we were running our business before in the furniture space. But what happens here is that there's also compliance matter, right? When you are, renting a device, you don't own the device, the third party just does it, and so there are the security considerations that you need to be aware of. And then lastly, obviously, as a large organization, there's also more that you can do with accounting. So you don't take advantage of the depreciation benefit that you could get by owning those devices. And so that's kind of what we figured out earlier on. So we kind of, avoided, we did launch that service and we noticed that most of the customers were just very early stage companies, very high risk companies. At any moment they would disappear. And that's just the nature of the type of business that would be attracted to leasing versus buying, right? The type of companies that are more interested in procuring and managing the assets are more mature organizations that understand very well the benefits of owning devices.
But I like what you said there, that like if you're very early stage and you're just getting started, like GroWrk might not be for you. But if you, and I guess it goes back to what you said before, if you care about security, or if your clients care about security, if you care about operation efficiency, if you care about maximizing the number of days that your employees can be productive, like if you care about those things, then that's where you should probably be using a solution like GroWrk, correct?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Cool. Now, Carlos, I know that you you think a lot about sustainability. And I wanted to get your perspective on, in the context of remote work, why is sustainability, in particular in IT asset management, how is that? How can you turn that into an advantage for companies?
An important thing nowadays. I mean, look, climate change is in the minds of everybody these days. I mean, look at what's happening in Los Angeles, right? For an example of, one of the reasons why people think about it, like, oh, this is because of climate change. Look at how radical and extreme weather conditions are these days, and they're being more recurrent, right? And so I think this translates into just an organization that is really responsible and really cares about the environment and the footprint that they leave on Earth because of their operations, right? So IT is a big one, right? you will be surprised that, a big percentage of the, CO2 emissions, happen from, devices, laptops, tablets, cell phones, et cetera, right? So not properly managing the disposal of those devices, has a big impact on the environment. And so any company that is serious about corporate social responsibility, has this as the main, guideline in their organization. We talk with enterprises all the time, and that's one of the main things that, they look after. How do you actually manage the life cycle of those devices? How do you responsible dispose of them, by, recycling it or, destroying devices in a responsible manner that minimizes environmental impact anywhere in the world, right? And that will help you, minimize that the carbon footprint that I mentioned earlier on. The other thing too is that by repurposing devices, this means you retrieve a device from an employee. Obviously, it might need some maintenance, repairs, but you extend the lifespan of that device. You are minimizing procuring new devices, which will save you money, but also, mitigate environmental impact by simply expanding or extending the lifespan of those devices. Um, and lastly, we want to make sure that organizations are able to track and understand what is that real impact. Meaning, meaning, meaning this is not just something that we're saying, meaning how can we estimate how much you're saving, in carbon footprint by recycling the devices through the proper channels with the right partners anywhere in the world, right? And then providing you that feedback so you can, repurpose it and report it under your own, CSR guidelines that you have internally, right? And the other thing that I forgot to mention, which is important, and it would be the last one here is the legal implications and some legal implications of not doing this correctly in some countries, especially as you hire anywhere in the world. If you own devices in multiple countries and you're not aware of the local, laws around how do you manage the proper disposal of these devices, they could have, implications, right, to your organization. So it's best for you to, work with a partner or have the capability internally to understand, uh, how those rules and regulations vary from country to country where you're doing business. So you don't run into, a hot water at any point, right?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think the other thing I'd maybe add to that is certainly when you go higher up the food chain and you get to larger and larger clients, I've certainly seen more and more requirements and stringent requirements from those larger clients to say, okay, we don't just want you to meet GDPR regulations. We don't just want you to meet like the standard anti-slavery obligations. Like we've got our own specific requirements that we're going to impose on you. And if you don't meet these requirements around sustainability, because lots of these large companies now have their own carbon capture targets and they're measuring that and doing those things. So I think that when you're selling to enterprise, this is where this can really having your ducks in a row and having your documentation ready to just respond to all of these complex RFPs that come through can just really help you accelerate deal cycles. Is that something that your clients see as well?
100%, 100%. It's exactly what we see.
Makes total sense. Um, so I wanted to switch now to some of the sustainability challenges that businesses face when managing assets. Um, so what are you mentioned before, like the country specific requirements. In fact, I haven't come across any like some of these like in the past, but I'm guessing there are certain times where there might be potholes that people trip into as they're doing this. They might not realize there's actually local legislation in a certain country that mandates you dispose of IT equipment in a certain way. And what other kind of key challenges might people be tripping into as they're managing this global workforce with IT infrastructure?
Yeah, look, I mean, there are big considerations. Not only disposing the devices, but even shipping devices, right? Just the fact that you're shipping devices with batteries, different countries have different ways of looking at it, and the responsibilities that they assign to your organization if something went wrong, right? Just imagine you ship something, and all of a sudden that battery explodes, halfway through it, right? If you're not prepared, if you don't understand, the implications of that, with the context of the regulatory framework in the country that you're doing business, you can have big exposure as an organization, right? And so this is important. This is the reason why it's important to work with a company that specializes in this and that understands this, unless you're willing to invest in developing these resources internally, these are risks that just exist and they are there, right? And so it's just the nature of the devices that we work with and doing business globally. And it requires us. It's the same thing with someone like omnipresent, right? You need to understand what are the regulatory frameworks of the people that you hire in every country, so that you ensure that your customers are compliant at any point, right? The same situation happens with IT equipment. You need to make sure that you're compliant with the local regulatory frameworks whenever you're doing business, shipping, retrieving, or have company-owned assets.
Mhm. I guess the way that I often think about this is if there's a strategic investment that a company's going to make in a certain country, let's say you have made the decision you're going to hire 40 people in Mexico, then it makes sense for you to become an expert in employment law in Mexico, benefits in, did I say Mexico? Mexico. That was the example I'm using. We're going to say Mexico. So it makes sense for you to become an expert and build in-house infrastructure to have HR people, benefits people, provide a world-class offering unique to that country. But I guess the same thing applies in your world, right? So if you're just hiring one person in Mexico, do you want to be like an expert in understanding how to get IT equipment to that person in Mexico? Do you want to be an expert in Mexican data protection laws uh, and equipment recycling and on all those kind of things and the liability that might come with that? And if, like you say, if something blows up, do you want to be liable for that, or do you just want someone else to take care of that for you? Right? I guess that's the decision that companies have to make.
That's exactly right. And that's a great analogy. It's exactly what you describe. But look, ultimately, this is a matter of scale too, right? I mean, hiring from anywhere, it's one of those challenges that, so we have customers that, they don't know where they're going to hire. They're open to
Mm,
hire anywhere. They just, whomever is the best candidate, they recruit that individual and onboard that person. So we need to have the capability to serve, those needs on demand, right? And then we have the larger established customers that, they do have scale. They have hundreds of employees or thousands of employees. They have predefined, growth plans and, certain regions. And they might have developed this capabilities internally, but, you know, solutions like ours did not exist, right? And now there are an inflection point where, solutions like ours are maturing. We've been doing this pretty much the longest for, and so we understand pretty well what is needed to perform. And keep in mind, this is logistics. Global logistics is super challenging. How do you unify it and provide a standardized solution? It's not easy, right? It's something that we continue to build and evolve, especially with new technologies, these days, right? To provide a better experience to our customers and mitigate a lot of this, risks that we discussed, right? But customers today, that have the volume, they have developed expertise internally, they're also looking at us and saying, hey, is there a better way to do this than what we're doing it today? Right. And
mm,
sometimes the answer is yes.
mm. That's a really good point, and actually comes on to my next question a bit. If I could ask you for a second, if you put yourself in the shoes of, let's say that a growing startup company raised funding 6 months ago, they're growing their teams. Somebody's coming in and saying, look, we need to really make a decision now about getting away from this ad hoc IT equipment stuff. We need to get more systematic about it. What
Yeah.
would the best practices be for somebody who's looking to make a decision or make a selection on something like this right now?
Yeah. Look, it depends on the industry that you're operating in. If you're in fintech, if you're in healthcare, you just got to do it. You got to do this from the very beginning, right? You
Mm-hmm.
have to provide company owned devices, and you have to make sure that you're on top of anything when it comes down to securing those endpoints anywhere in the world, right? For other industries, it's more about how much do you care about the IP that is in those devices? How much how confident are you that, you're not getting exposed and there's no, you're not opening up any angles to attacks, right? On your system. So, you know, there are multiple solutions out there in the market. We're building our own security solutions as well. We have our own device management solution, and there are a bunch of other products that are coming along that complement very well what we have been doing around logistics globally. But this is a main consideration when it comes down to when is the right time to, explore a solution that helps you mitigate these risks, right?
Mm,
Again, it depends on the industry. In the industry, obviously,
mm,
at the very beginning, you want to minimize capex and IT equipment. I mean, resources might be limited, so thinking about procuring equipment for employees, or contractors might not be top of mind right now. But if you are operating in a highly sensitive industry with, high regulatory frameworks, you just got to do it.
mm. And I guess it's going to be different for every company and their needs. But what are the most common best practices that I mean, I'm guessing every kind of RFP, if you call it, will have an element in there about price. But what are the questions that are always or most commonly overlooked that people don't realize are really important that they don't include in their requirements?
Yeah. I think that, it has to do with not understanding, in which direction the organization is going to go to in terms of growth, right? I think that, we have seen every single use case that you can think about, right? We have companies that start exploring hiring globally that, ultimately decided, you know what, that's not for us. We're going to stay locally. We have companies that, eh, they had built a global organization that have all this infrastructure already developed, thousands of employees, and they're coming to a point where, hey, we need to cut costs and we need to make sure that we're doing this more effectively, that we are doing it ourselves, right? So it's really all over the place. I think that, you know, really what it comes down to is you as an organization, you need to be prepared to move fast and to be resilient, right? One of the benefits of embracing distributed workforces it precisely enables you to really hire talent from anywhere in the world, right? You're not locked up in, whatever cost of labor is in your your headquarters, whatever they are located. You're really opening up to hiring the best possible talent anywhere in the world. And guess what? You probably are going to save money. That's the reality, right? By having flexibility, you have access to this talent, and you also give opportunities to professionals that otherwise they wouldn't have. And because of that, what we have noticed too is, they tend to perform better than what we're traditionally, accustomed to, at least here in the U.S., right, where we're headquartered. But ultimately, I think the consideration is, where do you want to see your organization going? Do you want this organization to be truly global, to be truly diverse, or do you want to stay focused in one place? You just want to hire in one office, maybe have a better way to run your systems, your processes when it comes down to IT, and what are the implications to do that? So earlier stage companies don't really know this. And so that is the biggest, consideration.
Mm,
My advice would be, prepared for just being flexible, being nimble. You can test this low cost solutions, figure it out what works best for you, and then course correct along the way based on what you're seeing, where your organization is going. Because
mm.
we've seen everything. Again, we've seen companies that, tried hiring abroad and you know what, that's not for us. It didn't work, right? Or some others that they just exploded right away. And that was the way to do it from day one, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess the key point is finding a partner who can react to your specific situation, right?
Exactly. That can adjust to your needs
Yep.
as they evolve.
Got you. Carlos, one thing you've mentioned a few times now is about maintenance of equipment, and I guess I'm curious to just dig into that in a bit more detail. Like, how can companies implement maintenance strategies that might improve or enhance the IT devices, the lifespan of these devices?
Yeah, no. One of the biggest gaps that organizations have today when it comes down to their IT, capex is that you don't really have a good understanding of the condition of those devices, right? So one of the main use cases that we come across is that you have organizations that have these IT closets full of old equipment. They don't know what works. They don't know what they could use. We're like, hey, why are you doing that? Like basically, solutions like ours help you identify and audit every single device. Really give you an understanding on what is the condition of each device, and either that device can be repaired or can be repurposed, or that device should be disposed. And, even, solutions like ours provide you with a buyback offer where, you can unlock some of that capital that you just have there, right? For residual value for those devices. So, there's just tons of efficiencies that you can unlock just by leveraging a tool like ours, right? But ultimately, where we want to go, and really one of the solutions that we're building here at GroWrk that we're very excited about rolling out pretty soon is predictive, maintenance, right? Now we have the capability to look into what is the condition of the device anywhere in the world and proactively, let know managers, hey, that device is reaching capacity when it comes out to, memory, or, being able to provide diagnostics, real time, so that you proactively can minimize any downtime, right? And so now with AI, which is really what we're building this with, will enable us to provide smart, insights, and enable our customers to be proactive about tackling, potential challenges and optimizing their the IT infrastructure to minimize this downtime. So that's where predictive, analytics come into play, where maintenance come into play, right? Having a partner that can quickly assess what are the issues with those devices, recover those devices if needed, repair them and redeploy them, or swap them all together for another device so that you minimize that downtime and cost incurred to your organization.
True. That's super interesting. And I guess that's a use case that's much more applicable to lots, even domestic companies, right, who are hiring
Mhm.
domestic. I remember back in my office-based days, this company I worked for, that shortly after I joined, there became like an IT shelf in the office, and then all of a sudden that became 2 shelves and 3 shelves. Then all of a sudden it became a cupboard, and it just became like a Harry Potter chamber of
Uh,
laptops of stuff that just wasn't getting looked at. So what you're saying is like, and I think that's super fascinating, like that AI point you mentioned. Like, so what you can say is that you can identify like the usability of those devices and get them back into circulation much more effectively.
it's about reducing waste really, and
Mm.
becoming more lean and efficient, right? And I think that, in the IT space, there are a lot of inefficiencies, right? And that are, rooted in, just old practices and the way we used to do things. What you mentioned is the old way of doing things, right? I think all of us who have worked in office have similar stories where, hey, I need a charger. Just go in that closet, figure it out what you can find. Okay, right? In same situation. And I think that right now we're moving with this technologies, with this tool that we're developing, we're helping companies really be super lean and very mindful about every single cent, they're spending when it comes down to IT, and really repurpose that into, higher productive, projects, right? Instead of, some devices that are just collecting dust.
Yeah, it makes total sense. You mentioned like e-waste there. I think that is generally like a growing concern. Um, I read a UN survey recently talking about like the amount of devices that were actually being collected and recycled. Um, so in your mind, what responsible disposable practices can businesses be thinking about to mitigate this environmental impact?
Yeah, look, again, it comes down to you understanding exactly what happens to those devices at the end of their lives, right? At the end of life. So eh, they have to be somewhere, and either you have it in storage, occupying valuable space in your office or someone's apartment, worst case scenario, which also happens a lot. Or you do the right thing, which is properly dispose of those devices, following environmental regulatory frameworks, ensuring that devices are being recycled or even repurposed, right? Through us, for example, many organizations donate those devices to, NGOs and, good causes altogether. Like, hey, you have 10 devices that, could be productive in a school somewhere in Mexico, Latin America, right?
Mm.
So those are the sort of things that, we can help organizations achieve by simply, putting front and center the need to better manage the end of life of the devices that they already have procured, in their organization. And the impact, it can be massive, not only from an environmental standpoint, but also from a societal standpoint, right?
Yeah, I love that because even if you think that you've had a laptop for a while and it's like operating really slowly, it's like taking its time to do anything. Like, I guess if you recycle that, you wipe it and you take it to a school that's going to have minimal number of programs on it, like probably it's going to work for a good amount of time and be much faster because you've taken all of the crap off it, right?
And when we do that, basically, yes, there's a data destruction certificate that is provided. We wiped the entire, hard drive, everything, and to just, it, it set back up, basic operating system so that it can continue working, by itself. But yeah, that's exactly how that works.
Mm, got you. So earlier on, Carlos, you mentioned like certain countries might have specific laws, but I guess I'm curious to get your take on how some of these challenges might vary by region. Like, so if you're looking
Yeah.
at like Southeast Asia, do you have different challenges there versus like Southern America and other everything else in between?
I think the most stringent, regulations are really found in the European Union. I'm just comparing the European Union versus the U.S. Right? I think in the U.S., companies tend to be a little bit more passive about it, simply because there's not a lot of enforcement, and yes, it is something that could happen, but rarely you see enforcement around these things, right? But the EU is a different thing altogether, and that it's more strict, and it's just a clear example that if you're not careful, you can get fines left and right, and for not managing those devices in the right way. And you can make a case for every single country, scale this globally, and who knows what you're going to come across if you're doing business there for the first time, right?
100%. And do you see that like the employees who are involved in using their equipment, do you find differences in behavior between like large organizations and small organizations? Do you see any differences in behavior there?
Yeah. So when it comes down to the how do they treat a device? Yes, there's a difference, but I would say that historically, employees, especially those seasoned employees, they're just not used to retrieving returning devices, right? They're just used to, hey, I used to work with these companies, they never recover device. I have them collecting, dust there, and then I'll figure it out what to do with them. I probably, you know, I'll figure out how to dispose those. And I don't know if you experienced this. I actually have experienced that. I worked in finance for some time, right? And so I do have some laptops there that are they just they're there. They were never collected. They never asked me to return them. So what do? You just keep them. So it's about also educating a people, right? It's about educating them on the importance of properly managing these devices, why it's important, beyond the threat of, fine. It's more about, hey, you have a social responsibility to ensure that you are minimizing environmental impact by properly managing devices that, have toxic components, batteries, et cetera. Right. And
Mm.
so we make an effort here to try to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I actually returned my first ever device remotely just before Christmas, maybe like 3 months ago. And it's one of those things that it's never the most important thing to do, right? You've got your day at work, you've got your new laptop already, you're already starting to work, you've got a bunch of things to do. It's never like, oh, I need to prioritize to get my old laptop back. So I think you're right. Like it's important for people to know why they're doing it, why they're sending it back, but also make it really simple for them because, in an office, you just go into you go to the IT person, say, here's my laptop, and they take care of it for you. But in this remote world, it's really important to just make it really simple to like, hey, here's how you print the label. Hey, here's how you package it up. And get a courier to come and collect it and all the rest of it. Right? Those are the simple things that you just need to make uber clear to employees to make it easy for them to do. Right?
100%. Yeah, we do that. We do that by sending documentation whenever we send a box. Even in the employee portal, we make an effort to educate employees on the importance on treating these devices with that care, right?
Yeah, 100%. So Carlos, can you give me like an example of a client that's uh, gone through one of these changes where they've implemented sustainability into their IT practices? Like, what impact did that have? What lessons could people learn from this experience?
Yeah, for sure. So, we have companies of all sizes. One that comes to mind right now, it's an organization that has employees in over 60 countries. They basically didn't know how many devices they had that could still be used or had to be sent to end of life, right? And so when we came on board, we fully onboarded all of their devices platform. We went through an extend audit. So what that means is that they sent us devices directly to our warehouses in multiple countries. When it got to the warehouse, we basically inspected one by one, tested, what was the health of those devices, and if they could, you know, you have we grade them basically A, B, C, and depending on the grade, you can determine, whether they can still be used or they need to be they reached end of life. And so what we would do is effectively that, right? For this organization specifically, we ended up recycling about 30% of their devices that were just sitting there collecting dust in their offices. A lot of them were sent back to, were given the option to buy them back from them because they could still have some, residual value. And so they were able to set to unlock about $25,000 of, for equipment that was just sitting there, right? On top of managing devices that, properly disposing of devices that were, they didn't know they could still be used. And that was the only reason why they were holding onto them, knowing that those devices just were not working anymore, right? Uh, or they were just too old, right? And so that is simply that is one example of the impact that we can make or in any organization just by providing visibility on all their assets, 100%, and giving them the tools for them to make informed decisions to better optimize those assets.
Yeah, makes sense. I really like that metric of like, understand, like they recycled 30% and that gave them $25,000, right? Of buybacks. Like, what are the metrics for success that companies should be thinking about if they're going to implement or like if they're setting sustainability goals in IT asset management?
Yeah, I think the first one is really what is the average, lifespan of the devices that you procure, right? In other words, are you maximizing the value and the use time of those devices, or are you, doing something similar to what happened with fast fashion, right? Just buy one and get another one replaced, and without thinking about the consequences, right? And their company, you would be surprised. Their companies are just like that. They're like, oh, that device is not working anymore. Just get a new one. And, that adds up. And, that's why these organizations tend to have these big holes in their balance sheets when it comes down to, how much they're spending in their IT, assets. So I would focus a lot on what is the average, eh, lifespan of the devices that they have, right? From the moment they procure them to the moment that they dispose of them, 2 3 years. 3 years tend to be like a healthy, average, 2.5 to 3 years. Um, and so if it's less than that, look into what's happening with those devices. The second one would be exactly what we described in the beginning of this conversation, which is how are you tracking your metrics on CSR, right? And the impact that you're having in your environment by ensuring that you're getting, the proper certificates for carbon certificates for what you're doing for saving, for recycling these devices correctly and minimizing that impact, right? Um, and the last one would be simply again security, right? How do you make sure that every device has been properly wiped and and the data has been properly destroyed, and that you have the certificates to support it when it comes out to any certification you're pursuing or need to maintain, the just SOC 2 or ISO.
Yeah, 100%. Carlos, I've learned loads today, and I really appreciate all of the insight you've given. Feel like this could be a real good, like piece of content for people who are looking to implement more sustainable IT strategies. One final question from me. You've talked a bit about how you might be starting to use AI as part of your platform, but I'm curious to get your take on like what does the future of sustainable IT look like? What trends or innovations do you see shaping this marketplace?
Yeah. It's really AI. AI is unlocking so much value so fast, and we're just scratching the surface, which is very exciting, especially in a place like in the business that we are in, right? Which is basically, IT global logistics, right? I think that, what's happening right now is that AI is enabling us and will enable us to really provide real time data on the impact that any organization is having when it comes down to their carbon footprint, when it comes down to, security, et cetera, right? That has not existed historically. The work that goes behind getting those metrics today, it just takes a lot of time. Even, internally, we have team members that do this, that crunch the numbers and provide these reports to our customers. Now with AI, what we're doing is that we have all this data, we're organizing all of this data, we're training our models to make sure that we can provide reliable information consistently to our customers, and use, data that is actually useful, right? And that can help drive decisions. And again, I think that that is a feature of this, right? Every time, I envision a short term feature here where any company can, they have their specs, they have the type of employees that they have the number of headcount that they expect to hire in any given quarter or year, and immediately get a report. And this is the expected environmental impact. This is the expected, security considerations or risks that you should be focused on mitigating, and provide you with playbooks on how to do each of those things proactively instead of reactively, which is how traditionally, things happen, right? And so imagine connecting all of this data internally so that for whatever certification you have, now it can be fed into that directly, right? Like whenever it comes down to auditing your posture, all you can do is just click, all you do is just click a button and you'll get all that data pulled down and, immediately provide proof of where you stand at any given point. And I think just being able to have data real time to make better informed decisions it's really here to stay. And that's really our focus right now when it comes down to scaling our operations globally and giving our customers the tools they need to become more effective, more efficient organizations.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. The idea of like, you've got all this data here, but what are you doing with it? Right. And then to have that, to have something like that, like you mentioned, to not just tell you what you've got, but provide recommendations on what you should be doing and what other companies are doing in this space. I love that. And I definitely agree with you. Like I could see in a few years' time that being the standard, right? Everyone's using like this smart IT infrastructure that just gives you that level of input and foresight.
And look, the objective is basically threefold, right? If you're looking to save money, you're looking to minimize your costs in IT, infrastructure spend. You're looking to eh, minimize your cybersecurity risks by ensuring that every single endpoint is properly managed. And you're looking to minimize your carbon footprint by keeping real time, data on what's happening with any device throughout its life cycle, right? And really proving or generating the data and providing the certifications and the validations that you need to ensure that you are following the guidelines that you set out to accomplish as a company, right? And I think that is what a responsible organization, will do and should do. And so the tools that we're building are enabling and will enable these companies to accomplish their objectives in a responsible way.
Sounds amazing. Carlos, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure, and thank you so much.
George, thank you very much for having us. It was a pleasure.